This is an overview of my rainwater harvesting project after 13 weeks of progress. I'm located in Tucson, Arizona. At the beginning of the summer, the yard was covered in gravel and landscaping fabric. There were some existing cactus, agave, and non-native trees, but I wanted to create a significantly lower temperature environment and provide a visually stimulating natural habitat. To show you the progress, I'm first going to talk about how water flows through the garden, and then we'll survey the plants that are growing. When it starts raining, water will begin to collect and move off the patio into this basin, which I call the window basin. I've estimated that this basin will hold about 115 gallons of water in the event of a storm surge. For most of the summer rains, this basin has had enough capacity to hold all the patio runoff, and it only overflows during very significant events. This basin will lose some capacity as it fills with plants and mulch. At the same time, I want to make the runoff capture more efficient. Right now, I'm just using a temporary solution with this corrugated pipe, but I'm going to install gutters. This area in between the patio and the basin, it is relatively close to my house, so I didn't do anything with it initially. I basically felt like I didn't understand enough to know whether it was a good idea. However, after seeing the first large monsoon rain, I decided to add some additional capacity. This is known as an infiltration trench. It's basically just a hole filled with mulch. It has been working fine, and it seems to be encouraging roots to grow into it, but I'm worried about how long the mulch stays moist, more than 24 hours, so I might convert it to another basin. In large events, the window basin will flow into the secondary one. You can tell that this one does not get nearly as much rainwater based off the limited plant growth. However, this basin will collect irrigation for one of the trees as it gets larger. Now let's look at a separate flow of water. Rainwater will start pooling up near this shed due to neighboring lots and the roof of the shed, and then flow through the yard down to the blue Palo Verde tree. I put in some small berms and basins up here to prevent the water from picking up velocity and causing erosion. We also have another infiltration trench. This will be used to collect irrigation, and it is useful during large events. Water ultimately flows to rest in the natural basin that surrounds this blue Palo Verde tree. This whole area used to get a lot more standing water, but now that there's some grass growing, the absorption has significantly improved. Now let's look at the plants. The yard I was working with came with an olive tree and several beds of cactus, agave, and succulents. Unfortunately, the entire yard, including these beds, had landscaping fabric underneath. Landscaping fabric is quite bad for water retention and soil health. I removed the fabric everywhere except these raised beds where removing it would be destructive. Thus far, adding the basins has not impacted the existing vegetation in any obvious way. My main focus has been adding several trees to the west side of the yard. The trees are all Tucson natives. 2 are blue Palo Verde and 1 is a velvet mesquite. The trees were added just before the first big rainstorm. I plan to irrigate them for the first few years in order to ensure that they establish well. The irrigation will be captured by the passive water harvesting earthworks, and in storm events, the trees will gather additional water. It is really hard to predict how large these trees will become because there is quite a lot of competition with nearby trees already, which have incredibly extensive root systems. So even if you can guess how much water is available in this area, you don't know how much the tree will get. I plan on making a video about those estimates later. Let's get in close with one of the blue Palo Verde. A grasshopper has eaten some bark off of the tree recently, but otherwise the trees have seemed healthy and have grown noticeably. The mesquite has been somewhat slower growing, which makes sense because it is less of a natural basin effect compared to the Palo Verdes. With the basins, part of my goal was to get rid of the gravel in favor of plant cover. Gravel is quite a bit hotter, as you can see from this thermal image comparison. So here we're looking at the patio. It's almost 120 degrees, while it's about 100 degrees outside. The gravel itself is about a mid-hundreds, 102, 105. And then looking into the basin, almost 10 degrees cooler in there, down in the lower 90s. In the basins, I spread a mixture of native grasses, shrubs, and wildflowers. I also incorporated a few transplants from the nursery. We'll go through each of the major plants and I'll mention which is which. First up, desert senna. This is grown from seed in several different places in the yard, and it just started flowering around 12 weeks after the first rain. 2 were lost due to what was apparently a caterpillar attack, but the bees love this thing, so I hope it continues to grow. The desert senna was grown from seed, and so are these cosmos flowers blooming next door. This wildflower has a distinctive shape that you can see rather early on, and at this point it's been blooming for about 3 weeks. It's fun watching its petals explode during rainstorms. Next we have a small butterfly milkweed and a desert hackberry. Both of these are transplants. The Arizona poppy has absolutely been taking off lately. Another successful one grown from seed. This is all one plant so far. It was the first wildflower to bloom, but has really shown its colors consistently the last few weeks. There's been quite a bit of grass growing. All the grass is from seed. I only try to identify grass once it has shown its inflorescence. Right after I initially spread this seed, there was a huge storm, which then washed the seed everywhere, so I'm not really sure what is in any given area. In the main basin, I'm guessing this is Rothrock grama. The other grass is mostly unknown so far. Elsewhere in the yard, this blue grama has been doing well, and I love the shape of its seed head. There is a small cluster of needle grama, which I hope will spread. This grass is the most common one I see in my neighborhood. Side oats grama has been doing really well near this Palo Verde tree. Probably a combination of the natural basin, the recently disturbed ground, and the tree's irrigation. This has had the benefit of shading the trunk of the Palo Verde, which really struggled at the beginning due to the intense sun in this area. Desert trees naturally want to shade their trunks in order to prevent water loss. There are a lot of animals visiting the yard, but I'm going to save that for a different video. So what's next? I'm really tempted to dig an additional basin in this area. Everything here was very temporary just to survive the monsoon season without too much erosion. Another basin will let me get rid of more hot gravel that is right next to the house, and also provide containment for some of the irrigation. At the same time, I would get rid of this trench, which would help with my concerns about it holding too much moisture for too long. Right now, it seems like I have the capacity for at least a 1-inch stormwater surge, so I don't necessarily need that extra capacity unless I make the capture more efficient. For example, I need to add gutters, which will reduce the water lost to splashing on hardscape, so I think that should really be the focus before I put in a new basin. I also want to improve the appearance of the rockwork. Honestly, I just threw stuff up really fast to stabilize the ground using rock that was already in the yard. So I want to tidy up some of the areas. These rocks are super hot as well, so I really want to consider if I need them or if I can aim to cover them with some soil and plant life. I will be planting some additional wildflowers soon. Summer is not the best time for growing wildflowers in Tucson, though obviously I had some success. That's it for now. Stay tuned if you want more nerding out about water harvesting.